Alrighty, welcome, Dave. All right, we're gonna get started, and I'm gonna hit record. Also, there's going to be an opportunity for one of you guys to do a. Actually, Andrew's just jumping on now. We've got a couple of late arrivals. G'day, Andrew. Good to have you here, mate. All right, we're nearly all here. We're still missing a couple of the guys, but they'll jump on whenever they get here. There's going to be an opportunity today, guys, for someone to volunteer to do a bit of a demo. I'm going to be doing a values elicitation today as a demo. So if there's someone that wants to volunteer to unpack their unconscious mind and find out what their unconscious drivers and priorities are, I can see Dave's pretty keen for that. So yeah, unless there's someone who wants to fight Dave for that one, I'm happy for you to jump in there, mate. Great. Alrighty. All right, Heidi, I'll just get you to mute yourself and then we can get started. Alrighty. So welcome to week 9 of Project Limitless, and last week we followed on with your vision. So I trust you had a chance to take a look at what was the vision that you wanted for your life. What are the dimensions of your life that you're intending on developing in your future? And values, which is today's topic, ties in very, very closely with your vision. Your vision is all about what do you want to create in your future, and your values are the unconscious priorities, or your conscious and unconscious priorities that are going to get you to your vision. So your values are like the rudder of the ship that are guiding you in the direction that's going to allow you to create your vision. So that's the subtle distinction. Values and vision and purpose, they're all very, very similar. They're very, very similar concepts. And so today we're going to be exploring a little bit more about this dimension of values, which are another way of getting clarity on what do you want for your life, how do you want to create the life that you want. And it's a deeper unpack of what are our priorities, what do we really want for our life. So why are we having this conversation? Well, the reason why we're having this conversation is because if you don't know what's important to you in life, it is very difficult to have certainty. It's very difficult to have a sense of direction. We go from being a ship sailing across the ocean with a rudder and a destination, and instead of us having clarity on where we're sailing, we're just allowing ourselves to just get blown around the ocean, just blown by the tides and blown by the wind. So when we have a vision and a purpose, and when we have clear values, we have a sense of certainty. We have an orientation that's more conscious rather than just allowing life to happen to us. Now, there's nothing wrong with allowing life to just happen to you, and this is the exploration that we're deepening today. Is if you are to consciously choose your life and to choose your priorities, what would you choose? And that, for some people, is a confronting contemplation. What do you want? What do you really want? That's really an extension of the conversation we're having, is what do you actually really want for your life, and what's important in order to be able to create that. So today's conversation is going to deepen your sense of clarity in what's important about life. And that is the fundamental theme of today's class. So you might want to write this one down. Your values are all about what's important to you. Fundamentally, your values are simply those things which are important to you. Now, there's no right and wrong. There's no good and bad. Your values are just simply your preferences. They are simply what is important to you. Now, there's a difference here between what you like and what's important to you. So, for example, we will always do what's important to us. For example, you will probably do your taxes, not because you necessarily love them, although some of you might like doing your taxes, but certainly I get my taxes done not because I like doing taxes, but because it's important. That's an example of there's a difference between what you enjoy versus what's important. So there are certain aspects of what we feel like is important to us that we don't do for pleasure, but we do to avoid pain. And so your values are unconscious drivers. They are what motivate you, and sometimes those values are orientating you away from painful experiences or uncomfortable experiences, and sometimes they're orientating you towards pleasurable experiences. So pain and pleasure. So we're now introducing this, our values are what's important to us, and those things that are important to us could be stemming from a place of wanting to avoid the uncomfortable, or they could be stemming from a place of moving towards the comfortable. So either moving towards something or moving away from something painful. So I trust that makes sense. They're the two fundamental sources of motivation, also known as are you driven by the carrot or are you driven by the stick? And so what also plays out in our values is some of our values, we are valuing things because we're afraid. Sometimes we're afraid of things. For example, if you're afraid of failure, potentially you might value safety. Potentially, if you're afraid of betraying someone, well, you might value never putting yourself in a situation where you would ever risk betraying them. Right? So what we're really starting to explore here is there are degrees of risk that we're now playing with in life. The things that we're afraid of, we generally want to avoid. And so these are playing out in our values as well. Now, our values, these are our priorities. They are how we filter our preferences. This is how we make decisions. This is how we prioritize our life. This is how we prioritize our time, our energy. This is how we make decisions. Our values are ultimately what's guiding us moment by moment throughout our life. And a lot of our values, in fact, psychologists estimate about 95% of our behavior comes from our values, and this comes from NLP. 95% of our decisions come from our unconscious conditioning. And so that means that a lot of our values are installed or programmed or conditioned like habits, and they are programs that operate us without us needing to consciously pay attention to it. So we're now looking at the difference between being unconsciously driven versus consciously driven. All right, so these are now two other elements to now consider in your values, because right now, as an example, you are going to be sitting on some kind of chair and you might not be aware of the feeling of your left toe on the floor. Until I brought your attention to it, you weren't aware of it, but you now are. In the same way as you probably weren't aware of the sound of the air conditioner or the feeling of the hair on the back of your neck until I brought your attention to it. So this is the nature of our attention in the moment will drift, and there will be various unconscious conditioning that we all experience because of all the experiences of our life, our belief systems, as well as how we perceive life, that's guiding our preferences, that's guiding our priorities. Now, not all of these are fully conscious. For example, if you ask yourself, if you look at yourself and how you conducted yourself today, you might be asking the question, why did I get up at the time that I got up? I don't know. Why did I set my alarm clock at that time? What was the first thing that I did today? Did I get out of bed straight away and go for an exercise, or did I decide to sleep in? Did I roll over and give my partner a kiss, or did I go out and water the lawn? Like there are just things that we will automatically, instinctively do. And a lot of the time we don't know why we do them. Now, one explanation for why we do that is that our values are an unconscious program, which ultimately drives a lot of our unconscious decision-making process. So if we know on average that we have about 70,000 thoughts per day, and we know that approximately about 95% of those are going to be unconscious, meaning they just kind of happen in the background, and we know that there's about 30,000 choices that we're making per day, and we know that about 95% of those choices are happening unconsciously. Well, what do we know about our life? Well, we know that about 95% of what we create is simply a manifestation of those unconscious parts of us that are now being projected or being created in our life. Now, that's not a problem. That's just the way that the mind works. That's just the way that we've evolved. We've evolved so that we don't have to consciously put lots of attention into every single moment to make decisions. We've evolved so that we don't have to constantly think, am I going to get out of bed now? Oh, shall I get a drink of water? Oh, shall I eat something? Like, a lot of those habits have been conditioned to save us mental energy. So those are the programs and the habits and the patterns that we've evolved to have that just save us needing to think through every one of those 30,000 choices per day. Because if you had to put energy into every single one of those choices, you'd probably be exhausted at the end of the day. Like, shall I lean my right hand on the table right now while I'm watching this masterclass, or shall I lean my left hand on the table? It's like, if you were constantly battling and constantly contemplating all those little choices, right? There's a lot of extra mental energy that's going to get expended and used. So our values are an evolutionary way for us to program ourselves to survive and to thrive. Now, this is where it gets interesting. This is where it gets really powerful, because what we are now going to do is we are now going to take the unconscious programming of our values, which is simply a collection of all the experiences of our lives, our beliefs, a lot of the reference points of our past. You might have had memories from all throughout childhood, or traumatic experiences. You might have been through, potentially your parents might have got together and they might have had a successful relationship. They might have had an unsuccessful relationship. You might have been an intelligent kid at school, or you might have gotten positive feedback from your teachers at school. There'll be a whole lot of experiences throughout your life that will have conditioned and influenced how you perceive yourself. So your whole sense of identity has been programmed or conditioned moment by moment through a whole lot of experiences in life to get you to the point where you are now. And a lot of those experiences have resulted in unconscious conditioning, which is what we call our values. So now you might be asking, well, why is this important? Well, if we don't know what our unconscious conditioning is, it is going to be steering the ship without us even knowing it. So think of it this way. If you don't know what your values are, it's literally like you've got a self-driving car that's driving itself without any input from you, and it's just going to be doing it on its own. And so now this is our opportunity to really reflect on what are our unconscious priorities, what is important to us, so that we can now challenge the values that we've accumulated, that we've generated, that we've conditioned into ourselves over the course of our lifetime. And we now get to question, are the values that I have unconsciously, are they serving me? So that's the key question. This is the point of exploring your values. First of all, it's getting clear on what's important to you. And then the next question is what's important to me actually what I want to be important? So have I actually chosen my values consciously, or have I allowed my life to unconsciously condition what's important to me? So this is now regaining a sense of sovereignty and freedom over life by now questioning, why do I do what I do? Is it because of my history and my past and things that have happened to me? Or is it because right now I am going to consciously choose this and consciously prioritize this based upon what I want for my life now? So there's almost like there's two forces going on here. There's the forces from our history and our past, and there's our forces from the present moment now of what we want to experience independent of our past. So this is a great opportunity to get clear on what part of my experience is coming from conditioning and things that have happened to me, and what part of my experience do I now want to be driven by what I want to consciously choose now from my life from this moment forward. So this is a line in the sand moment. This is a moment where you get to decide and get to discern what were my priorities that were kind of almost like given to me by my upbringing, by society, by my parents, by my school system, by the mainstream media. Because our values are ultimately, a lot of our values are absorbed. We're absorbing our values like a sponge. We are like a sponge. From the moment that we enter this world, you just look at kids. Kids, I remember when I was chatting to my chatting in front of my little, I think she was 3 years old at the time, my little 3-year-old niece. And you've got to be careful when you talk around kids because they pick up on things. I remember I dropped a swear word in the background, and she picked up on it, and I was like, wow, like she didn't even repeat it then. She repeated it the next day, and I know that she didn't get it from anyone else because that was one of my unique words, and her mum wasn't incredibly happy about that. But that was an example of, wow, kids are like sponges and humans are like sponges. And so we are absorbing our values, which are our priorities, which we're absorbing them from our environment, from our conditioning, from our experiences. So that's happening. That's a phenomenon that is already taking place. And most of our values get conditioned and absorbed into us between the ages of 0 and 7. So psychologists know that most of our values get absorbed and get conditioned between the ages of 0 and 7. So that's like the critical period in any human's life. They're the formative years of any human. And so what goes into a human in those first 7 years is going to shape a significant part of a human's identity, about how they view life, about what their role is in life, and how their perspective on life. So it's not a good thing or a bad thing, it's just how life works. And so now we get to take a look at what is the unconscious conditioning, what are the deep priorities that perhaps we didn't even realize that we had, and now we get to challenge them, we get to look at them, we get to become conscious of them, so we get to decide whether we want to keep them, or modify them, or upgrade them, or transform them. So that's the nature of the conversation today. So the first step here is really understanding that your values are your priorities. That's really what they are. What's important to you, what your priorities are. We make time for the things that are important to us. That's one of the biggest excuses that we make, is when we don't want to do something, what do we say? Oh, I don't have time. Now, it's not that we don't have time, it's just that it's not important for us to make time for it. So that's a really important distinction, is we have time for the things that are important to us. So whatever you generally are going to spend your time doing, unconsciously, that's what's important to you. So if you find yourself spending time watching Netflix, well, unconsciously, that's what's important to you. If you spend time exercising or spending time in nature, well, that's what's important to you. If you spend a lot of time with your family, well, that's what's important to you. So where you spend your time, when you allocate your time and resources, is giving you some clues as to what's really important to you. Now, another good example here is, let's just look at health. For a lot of people, they say that health is something that's important to them. But for some people, they might be like 200 kilos overweight. You know, they might just be eating junk food all day, and they've never literally been for a run, or they've never done anything physical in their life, and they might say that health is important to them. Well, is it really important to them? Or are they just saying that it's important to them? Are they intellectualizing it and saying, yeah, well, of course health is important? But you've then got to question, well, are we embodying what we say is important? So the only thing really that matters here is what's embodied. What are we demonstrating by our way of being, by our lifestyle, by the decisions that we're making? We need to gauge what's important to us by how we're showing up. Because it's really easy in this conversation to go down the path of saying, intellectually saying, oh yeah, money's important to me and health's important to you, but we might be 200 kilos overweight and broke, right? So it's like, well, how important is it really? You know, if those are the things that are playing out. And it's not a judgment. The purpose of this is not to judge ourselves or to criticize ourselves. This is solely for the purposes of self-awareness and understanding ourselves so that we can transform ourselves. So the judgment is not required in any of this process. This is an exploration, and this is an upgrade in our consciousness. And the only way that we can get advanced levels of self-awareness is by being honest. And so this is a conversation about getting radically honest with our life to say, am I getting the results that I want in my life, and what's actually really important to me? And when you can have that level of honesty, we create breakthroughs because we see things that we weren't prepared to see before. So this is a great part of this conversation that I love. I love having these conversations because in the space of honesty and self-reflection, there is always empowerment. Like, this is an empowerment conversation. Because through being open, being vulnerable, being open to recognize where we might have not prioritized something, we get access to deeper wisdom. So I trust you can appreciate that by having this level of conversation about what's actually important, this is taking responsibility for living a conscious life. This is taking responsibility for identifying if there's parts of our life that are not working. This is a major clue to see, that's why my life's not working. It's because I'm not prioritizing it. Great. So this is a very empowering breakthrough type of conversation, and it's one of the most important topics that I think anyone in life, any human can tap into because this goes to the deep source code. This goes to deep behavioral programming that is very, very insightful about why we do what we do, and importantly, how do we change it. So I've already touched on that your values can be moving away from something uncomfortable, so moving away from pain. They can be moving towards pleasure. They can be based upon fear, so doing things because we're afraid. They can be things that are based on illusion or misunderstandings. They can be based on limiting beliefs. They can be based on a whole lot of different things. None of that really matters, as you'll see in a moment when we go through a demonstration, because you'll see once we go through this process of eliciting your values, you'll see everything comes out in the wash. So you don't need to understand this in advance. When you understand the process draws out the wisdom. The process creates deeper awareness inside of you. And that's the great thing about doing a values elicitation, is that it gives you rapid and advanced levels of clarity about what's driving you at your core. So there's no right or wrong here. Leave judgment at the door. There's no need to criticize yourself. This is simply an honesty-based conversation where you're getting radically honest about what your priorities are for life. So what we're going to do here is we are going to take a look at how you do this process. And the way you do this process is really simple. So what you're going to do during this week is you're going to get partnered up with a partner, and you're going to go through this process. Now, this process, if you do it the way that I'm going to teach you, you can do this process really quickly. You can do this process in probably, as you'll see, in probably under 20 minutes or half an hour. And you'll see I'm going to do this now in a demonstration, and you'll just see how easy it is. And so I'm going to kind of explain some of the nuances as we go through the process, so you'll understand what I'm doing as I'm doing it, so that when you connect with your partner, you'll also be able to do the same thing. So it's really, really simple. So all you'll do is you just say to your partner, there's one question, and one question only. In the context of your life, what's important to you? So we're talking about the context of life. Now, we're having a conversation about life today, which just means life in general. If you wanted to help someone in a very, very, very specific context, so say, for example, if you were mentoring someone or leading someone in your team and you're wanting to help them to get super clear clarity in a particular dimension, you might help them elicit their values in the context of sales, or you might help them elicit their values in the context of a relationship. What we're going to do here is elicit your values in the context of just life in general. So we're talking about big picture values. So that's the question. In the context of life in general, what's important to you? And you'll ask your client that question, and they will just give you answers. And what we're looking for here is we're looking for answers that are generally not objects. So the answer that we're not looking for is values are not objects. A value is basically anything that, as we say in NLP, doesn't fit in a wheelbarrow. A value is a thing that doesn't fit in a wheelbarrow, meaning it's not a physical object. Right? So we're not saying chocolate, we're not saying mobile phone. We're looking for those things that are ideas, that are feelings, that are generalizations about life. So these are things like love, compassion, adventure, money, or wealth. And so that's a good example as well. You might say, well, hang on, money fits in a wheelbarrow because you can have currency. But we're not really talking about, when people value money, they're not talking about the coin or the bit of paper. They're talking about what the money represents. So the money actually represents wealth. It represents some kind of idea. So we're looking for the ideas in life of the bigger picture things that are important to us, that are not objects. So other examples might be what's important to you in life: intimacy, relationships, fitness, adventure, passion, purpose, inspiration. It could be things like motivation. It could be business. It could be sales. So we're looking for what are the most important aspects of what you currently value in your life right now. Now, the trick here is we're doing this process in the context of life right now. So not what you want to be important in the future, or not what used to be important, but right now, based upon what you're experiencing in your life, based upon your behavior and where you spend your time and your energy and where you're prioritizing your focus. What's important to you right now? Because you might find that when you ask your partner what's important to you, they might be thinking, oh, well, I'm 200 kilos overweight, and I really want to get healthy, and it's been on my New Year's resolution list for 5 years now, and you know what, I'm going to finally decide that it's important. But it's not actually important in that moment. It hasn't been important. And so this is where honesty is really important, because what we want to come out in the wash here is, if it's not important, we want it to not be on the list. So this is not about trying to come up with a great list so that you can look really good. This is about creating a very honest list where you actually get value and benefit from realizing what's not on the list. This is some of the most valuable things you're going to discover in this process, are what gets left off. In fact, when I first did this process, I was so baffled by some of the things that I left off my list, because I thought that they were fundamental things in my life, but when I actually really thought about it, they weren't important to me. And so you're going to get just as much insight from the things that don't make it onto the list as the things that do. So don't worry about how you look and what your list is going to tell you about you. This list is just for you. You don't have to publish this online on your social media profile. This is you getting an opportunity to get just honest with yourself and realize, oh wow, cool. That's my unconscious priorities for life. No wonder why I've been getting that result. So this is deep code that is quite. It gives you revelation. It gives you insight for how you're living your life. So it's really powerful. So that's the question. In the context of your life, what's important to you? And it's not about BSing yourself. It's not about trying to look good. It's just genuinely right now, based upon the way you're living your life, what's important to you. And there's no need to look good. There's no need for this list to be, you're not trying to get it right. It's really just a snapshot right now. And I can guarantee you, if you did it again the next day, and then the next day, and then continue to do it a year later, that list is always going to change. It's going to be constantly changing. That's just the way that life is. And even your understanding of certain elements in your values are going to be changing. So for example, we might do this process, and I did this process. I'll give you some examples of when I did this process. The types of things that came up for me were freedom. Freedom was really important to me. And then through my exploration of freedom, I then really started to go deeper, thinking, well, what is freedom? Like, is it something that is outside of me that's governing what I can and can't do? Or is it a feeling that I can tap into at any moment on demand, regardless of whatever I'm experiencing? So even just that challenged my idea of what freedom was, because I realized that I was prioritizing my life and I was chasing freedom when I realized, well, I already am free. Like, I actually realized that I was free already. Like, it's not something that I can acquire or chase. It was a feeling that I could tap into in the moment when I realized that I have free will. In any moment, I can do whatever I want. Sometimes it doesn't look like I have freedom. Like, it might look like I've got a job or I've got bills to pay. And it's like, I'm not free because I've got all this stuff to do. But then when we realize, hang on, I'm choosing it. I'm freely choosing that, so I already have freedom. So when I had that insight, which was just coming from an exploration in this process, I dropped the value of freedom because I just realized I was already free. Not important to me anymore. I already have freedom. Great. That one's sorted. Now what? And then the same thing happens around other things that we explore, like love. It's like, where's my experience of love coming? Is it coming from someone else loving me, or is it coming from me loving myself? The only way that I can experience love is whenever I generate a particular experience of love. And that might be in the presence of someone else, or maybe not. So again, it's starting to challenge. This is going to challenge all of your ideas about what's important. It's potentially going to maybe look like it's throwing a spanner in the works, but what it's actually doing is it's going to bring you to a greater level of understanding of yourself and life. And so be prepared for a lot of your values and a lot of the things that you thought were important to either dissolve or to transform. And in some cases, upon quick contemplation of your values, sometimes the things that you think are the most important in life, they can actually switch in your values list. So for me, freedom was up the top. I want to be free. And then I realized, hang on, I'm already free. Great, that's not important anymore. Great, done. So in an instant, you can have an insight, and then you realize that something that you were striving for or fighting for just is not an issue anymore. It's gone. And that's just the natural process that we're going through when we're looking at values. So that's the question. In the context of life, what's important to you. So I'm going to do a demo now, and we've got Dave who's volunteered to go through and do this demo with us. So thank you to Dave. I appreciate you for volunteering to do this. So I'm going to go through this process, and you'll see it's a fairly quick process. It's going to happen pretty quickly, and you'll see that when I'm asking Dave these questions, what I'm doing is I'm just kind of getting him to fire back these answers pretty quickly, and I'm just going to type them down as we go through, and I'll unpack what I'm doing with Dave as I'm doing it, so you've kind of got a bit of an understanding about a couple of the nuances about how the process works, so that you'll also understand you'll also understand this for yourself as you're doing this with your partner this week. So Dave, I'll bring you off mute and let's dive in to eliciting your values. So thank you, Dave. I appreciate you for jumping on. How you doing, mate?
Marvellous. Just a clarification question, Chris.
Mm-hmm.
So answer this question in the context of how I'm experiencing life at the moment.
Right now.
So through that, not where I wanted to be, but yeah, an assessment of where I am at the moment. Okay.
Yeah. So it's right now based upon the results that you're experiencing, where you're placing your attention, what you're prioritizing, like right now. Yeah. So, and I trust you can appreciate it's. You don't have to look good. So if right now, if you're valuing something that doesn't feel elegant or is not something you're proud of, like that's okay. What we're looking to do is we're looking to just get radically honest and just very, very, it's a very honest reflection of what's important to you right now, because from that, you're going to see code, you're going to see opportunities for how to update and reorientate yourself. Does that make sense? Yeah. Great. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to share my screen with you guys so you can kind of see how I'm actually doing this process. So as you're going along, you'll be able to follow along and see how I'm actually doing this. So I'm just going to get my good old trusty engineer's favorite spreadsheet out, as I like to use, and we're going to go through and we're going to capture Dave's value. So can you guys see my spreadsheet there? Is that nice and clear for you guys? Can you guys see that? Beautiful. Great. Just zoom in a little bit more. Great. So we're going to do Dave's value. So Dave, in the context of your life, don't try and impress me. Imagine that there's no one else looking on this call and it's just you and I doing this as best as you can. So in the context of your life, Dave, what's important to you right now?
Family.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Learning. Application, taking action.
Is that the same thing, Dave? And see what I just did with Dave then is I just checked in just to see if it was the same thing or different, because he just gave me two words.
Application, taking action. They could mean the same thing, but in the context of where my head was, there was a difference. Sort of application was the learning and the putting it into a framework. The taking action was the physically doing with a client. So I was in two different spaces there.
Great, perfect. Just wanted to check. So that's good. So we'll leave them as separate. Sometimes a client will give you two things that might be like, they might say finances and wealth creation. And they might be the same. You might say, yeah, actually, no, they're the same thing. I've just got two words that pretty much represent the same thing. So that's really all you're doing to check in with your client, is making sure that that sometimes you need to separate them because they're totally different things. So Dave, so keep going. What else is important to you?
Partner, Jenny, spouse, wife.
Yeah.
Bit on the side. Income generation. Building client base.
Yep.
Connection. Fun, laughter, comedy, humour. They're all the same.
They're all the same?
Yeah.
Great. Okay, so we got fun, laughter and comedy that are all going to be the same thing.
Yeah.
comedy. There we go. Comedy. Great. What else? Dave's just gone blank there. That's perfect. So a lot of the time what you'll experience when you're asking your client this is they will empty the buffer and they'll go now searching. They'll do another Google search and they've emptied out all the results on the first page, and now they'll go looking for the next page of results deeper in their unconscious. So this is when you ask again. So this is when you'll ask for the second time. So Dave, what else is important to you in the context of life?
Trust. Personal growth and development, for sure.
Yeah, and is that the same thing? Personal growth, personal development? Or is that different?
Yeah, that's one and the same.
Cool.
This is a relatively new thing, but it's serving me well. Quietness of mind. Just a time out to have a quiet head.
Beautiful. So quietness of mind, is that the same as time out? Is that sort of one and the same thing?
Yeah, I probably wouldn't say time out. Quietness of mind is
great.
Probably what resonates.
So Dave's just gone empty again.
Structure.
Yeah.
Consistency. Awareness. I'm going to say self-aware too, and I different from awareness. Awareness is in what's going on around me. Self-aware is in what's going on in my head.
Okay, great. So that's awareness of around you.
Yeah.
And this is in you.
Yeah.
Or in your head. Great.
Yeah.
Great. So Dave's just gone a little bit blank again, which is great. And now I'll ask a third time. So Dave, in the context of life, what else is important to you?
I'm laughing at myself because what's going through my head is the opposite of what I'm not having. So I would say laziness instead of health, or inconsistency. Yeah.
So is it laziness or something else? What is it?
It's a half-assed effort at health.
So,
we can just leave that off. Yeah. I was just thinking in the opposite of where I'm going. The concept of life, what else is important to me? Mainly sales. I don't know if I said sales.
No, sales. Okay, great. Now you did mention income generation and building a client base, but it sounds like the sales is different from those two, yeah?
Yeah, sales is the conversion, and the, I guess, income generation is the product for the conversion, and the client base is those in waiting. So there's differences there in my head. I think I said structure. Yeah, structure.
Yeah.
Adding value. Creating results.
Yeah.
And making a difference.
Great. So Dave, for the purposes of time, we'll I'm just going to finish it there. Just so
I think I'm empty anyway.
Yeah. So what we just did then was we pretty much had 3 bites at the cherry, which is usually all you need for this process. You know, you could go on and on and on, and a client will basically give you hundreds and hundreds of things. So really what we're looking for is pretty much just give them three questions, and in each question they'll typically answer between 3 and 7 values, because that's how much, that basically 7 chunks of information plus or minus 2 is about the amount of numbers of chunks of items that you can hold in your conscious mind. So when I asked Dave that, he basically reeled off a few different things, and then he went empty, and then he had to go back in and then do another internal Google search to come up with another 7 chunks of information. So you can kind of see they kind of come out, typically they come out in bursts or chunks of up to about 7. So that's step 1. Now, what we're going to do now is, Dave, I'm going to get you to go through these, and I'm going to get you to just trust your intuition, trust your unconscious mind. And what I'm going to get you to do is just pick a number. We're going to number these from most important to least important. And so don't feel like you've got to get it perfect. It's not like this. There's not life and death hanging on this exercise. It's just trust yourself to unconsciously just go through and just number them. 1 being most important, all the way down to we've got 19 of them. So 19 will be the least important. So what's most important starting from 1?
Partner, wife.
Mm-hmm. Got it.
Family.
Yep.
Connection. Fun and laughter.
Yep.
Learning. Personal growth. Got to put my eyes on that. I can't read. Okay, we got adding value.
Okay, so where was that one? That's
Down the bottom.
Number 7. Yep.
Yep. Making a difference would be after that.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Results, I suppose they're all actually. You can probably get making a difference, creating results is the same. I don't say.
Okay, I'll just lump them together.
Yeah.
Great. So that's 8. Yep.
Yeah. Okay, we've got income generation.
Okay, that's going to be 9.
Yeah. And taking action.
Yep.
Actually, taking action and application, you can probably just get rid of application. I see that as the same now.
Same thing?
Yeah.
Cool.
Same but different.
Yeah.
Okay, what have we got? Then I've got quietness of mind for sure.
Okay, so that will be 11.
Yeah, awareness of self and awareness of others.
Okay, so self in you first, and then others 13.
Yep. Okay, consistency. Trust.
Yeah, so we're up to 15. Yeah.
What have we got? Client-based sales and then structure.
Okay, so we've got 16, 17, and then structure is 18. There we go. Great. Well done. So this is what we call your values hierarchy. So now what we're going to do is we're actually going to filter these from 1 to 18. So with the spreadsheet, if you do this in a spreadsheet, you can just click the little button here, which is the filter from sorting to smallest to largest, and it will automatically rank them from 1 down. So Dave, that's your values hierarchy. So that's your unconscious blueprint for what is important for you right now in your life. So just take a look at that and just let me know if you feel like that's a pretty accurate representation of what represents your life, if you're thinking about what's important to you right now.
Yeah, it's fairly close. A couple of them could go one or the other, but that would be interesting that structure's at the bottom.
Yeah. So that's great. So what you this is beautiful, because what you're going to see, and this is great because you can do this with your partner, you can do this with a romantic partner, you can do this with your colleagues, you can do this with your team, you can do this with yourself, you can do this with anyone. This is how you bring someone to a greater level of awareness about what their unconscious priorities are in life. So this is a great self-awareness tool. So Dave, I'm sure there's going to be some things that pop out at you, like there's going to be some insights of things that jump out at you just by looking at that list, by seeing what you're prioritizing and what you're not prioritizing, and there maybe even what's not on that list. So I'm just curious, this is one of the things you might want to check in with your partner, is you just ask them, is there anything that pops out at you as being insightful from just an initial inspection of that list? Is there anything that jumps out at you that's insightful?
Yeah, the things that aren't on the list, so that's it's the health, the fitness, the consistent exercise, eating right, which is just all stuff that I've just let slip. So it's and look, if I'm not doing it, I'm certainly not valuing it, so that's fine. The other one was like sales and structure down the bottom. There's bits in the process like personal growth, adding value, creating results, making a difference, income generation, and I think it's probably right, because I'm seeing that as a process to go through, and then the sales happen as a result. But structure, structure being down the bottom makes sense, because I fly by the seat of my pants, and it's different every fucking time. So let's be real.
Great. So that's all good. So that's the first thing that's going to be the most valuable is, you'll take a look at that and you go, oh wow, okay, that's how I'm running my life. That's kind of like imagine that you've hired a CEO to basically run your life, and this is the list that you've given him about how you want him to run your life. Okay, I want you to prioritize these. I want you to focus on these. These are your deliverables. So this is what you've essentially giving to the CEO of your life to run your life on. Now, so the next step here, Dave, is the beautiful part about this is we now get to look at the vision for our life, for what we want to create. So this now links back to what we covered last week in week 8. And we're now referencing this list, which this list is like the rudder of our ship. This is the direction that we're sailing. We now want to check this against what's my vision, where I'm going, and is this values hierarchy, is this orientating me towards the vision that I want for my life? And it's not a good thing or a bad thing. It's really just an honest check-in to see, is my alignment of my values, is it taking me in the direction that I want? And this is now the next exploration of this exercise, which is now the second list, is going to be really questioning, well, what do I want my values hierarchy to be? So this is let's just put up here, this is your actual values right now. So this is actual values now. Then what you're now going to do is you're now going to create an ideal values list. So what you're now going to do, and we're not going to do that today because we don't have time, but what you would do, Dave, is you're now going to ask a couple of questions like, is there anything that should be on my list that is not on my list? So that's the next question. One of the questions is, what should be on my list? Now you might not like the word should. You might change that with, what do I want to be on my list? If you don't like the word should, but sometimes should is a nice word because it kind of just gives us a bit of a slap. What should or what do I want to be on my list? And you might find that it could be health, it could be wealth creation, who knows? It could be spirituality, it could be presence, it could be love. You'll start to explore, what are all the things that are not on my list? And if I know that what I want to create, so the next question here is, what is my vision, or what is my ultimate vision for my life? That's another great question. Based upon what is my ultimate vision for my life, is this values list that I've got now, is it going to get me there? Is this values hierarchy taking me in the direction that I want, and is it going to get me there either quickly, powerfully, authentically? Is it going to get me where I want to go? So that's the great question. Is this values list working for me? So these are some of the reflective questions that you're now asking by just checking in on this list and going, can I upgrade it? Is there a more powerful set of values that I could be tapping into that's going to take me more towards my ideal vision for my life? And what might come out of that is potentially things like, maybe structure might need to be more important, or who knows, maybe personal growth. If you made that more important, like if you start switching some of these values around, you might start to see some impact. So Dave, for example, if you were to, let's just check in as a bit of an example. If you were to put your wife at the bottom of this, and if you were to put structure at the top of this list, could you see the different results as an example? Not saying that's right or wrong, not saying we should relegate your wife, but could you just see what might happen in your life if that was the shift in priorities that would happen?
She might be very, very happy with that. That's good. Yes, it would certainly. Things would be different. Yeah.
You can start to play around with doing these mental experiments by saying, if I was to change this hierarchy so that I was to mix a few of these up, what would happen? And other examples would be, building client base. For example, if building a client base was your number one value, how would that change your life? If income generation was the number one, how would that change your life? If quietness of mind was number one, how might that change your life? And you can now start to play around with different combinations, and you can now start to do little thought experiments on, wow, are these values, are they actually the variables that are going to move the needle? Are these actually the inputs that actually have the capacity to generate results? And I'll give a couple of examples here of some of the insights that I got from this. One of the insights that I got from this was when I did my list, finances was something that was important. Now, when I reflected on the value of finances, what I discovered was that just valuing finances in and of itself probably wasn't going to increase my performance in terms of money. An example of what would improve my finances was going to be things like my ability to sell, my ability to attract clients, my ability to create impact and attract high value clients. So me just focusing on money and focusing, I want more money, I want more money, I want more money, that's not going to be the thing that creates the more money. What's going to create more money would be perhaps shifting my mindset around limiting beliefs around money, or potentially prioritizing education around wealth creation, or potentially upgrading my skill set so that perhaps my income earning capacity goes up. So there are certain things that are lag measures or impacts, and there are certain things that are lead measures or inputs that actually move the needle. So you'll find that some of these won't necessarily be the thing that creates the result. They will be the result. So there's an important distinction here between, are your values the output, or are your values the input that creates the output? So that's an important distinction, because if you're focused just on the output or the result, not on what creates the result, it's literally like you might log into your bank account and you're saying, well, I value wealth creation. I'm just going to stare at my bank account and just hope that it goes up. As opposed to knowing what are the inputs that are actually going to change that and then valuing those instead. So that's what I realized was, if I wanted to increase my income, great. The place to do that would be understanding sales, understanding how do I add more value, marketing, basically the commercial inputs that create the value. So does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's a great way to explore it.
Yeah. And the other thing as well is you'll also notice that some of these values are situations or experiences. So, for example, some people might say, what do you value? I value finances. In their mind, it's really, and one of the questions you can also ask, which is a deeper exploration if you want to go deeper, this is a powerful question, is what does that mean to me? So what does that value mean to me? So you might ask the question, well, what does connection mean to me? What does adding value mean to me? And so just by going deeper into exploring these, you will uncover, income generation, what does that mean to me? And as you go deeper into understanding that, you will flesh out the variables that make the most amount of difference. So is it about income generation, or is it more about wanting to have financial freedom? Is it wanting to feel a particular way? So now we're introducing, there's a situation or a result, like a tangible result we're wanting to create. And then there'll also be a feeling that we want to have as a result of the result. So for example, some people might value financial freedom. They might say, I value money. And you say, well, why do you want that? Because I just want to feel peace. I just want to feel it. I don't have to worry about my bank account. It's like, so what you're really wanting there is you're just wanting to be at peace. It's like, yeah. So they're wanting a feeling. So behind the value is actually a feeling that someone wants to experience. So this is where we can now deepen our understanding and evolve in terms of our consciousness. And we go, the reason why I'm wanting that thing is so that I can feel a certain way. And so now what we start to be able to do is unhook ourselves from the, if I get this, then I will feel this way type equation. So what we can now start to see in this values hierarchy is, yes, there will be certain results or tangible results we want to create, but there's also how do we want to feel about those. And sometimes there's a confusion. Sometimes there's a confusion between our feeling and the fact. So this is more of a, for those that want to sort of go a little bit deeper, these are the kinds of questions that you can ask, which is, am I valuing the situation or the feeling? Right. So this is now starting to create a deeper awareness about, well, hang on, do I just want money, or do I want what the feeling of money is going to give me? Do I just want structure, or am I wanting to feel at ease and organized and wanting to feel like I'm living in a state of joy? Do I just want to grow, or do I want to grow because I just want to feel like I'm happier and I'm on top of life? So this is a deeper exploration. So there's some questions that you can ask, and then what that's going to lead you to then create is your new list. So I'm just going to paste this here. So you're going to now have your ideal values list. So if I was going to do this with Dave, and if we had more time, I'd say, great, Dave, based upon your ultimate vision for your life, what if you're going to redesign this hierarchy, what would be the most important values that are going to take you directly to your vision? And you might say, actually, Chris, now that I think about it, I love my wife and she knows that I love her. I'm just going to bump her down a couple of notches, and I'm going to put personal growth up the top. And then that's actually going to allow me to love my wife more and be more present with her. It's actually going to allow me to grow and expand a lot more. And that's actually going to infiltrate the rest of my values list, and it's actually going to enrich everything else in my life. So there's not going to be a net negative. There's actually going to be a net benefit. So you can now start to explore which are the values that you would shuffle around that are now, it's like mix and match. You're literally custom designing your values list that's going to give you an optimized life. So that's really what we're doing now, is we're redesigning your values list. So that's the next step, is you're going to redesign. So you'll go away in your own time, you'll reflect on this, and you'll come up with what's your new list. And you might find there's some new values. There might be some new values based on this question here. You might see, I was missing that and I was missing that. I think that would be really nice to add to my list. And you might find that there's some values that you want to take off your list. So there might also be, what do I not need in my list? Maybe there's some things you can remove that just aren't adding any value, that are maybe fear-based, or that are actually draining your energy, or maybe heading you in the wrong direction. So that's how you're going to do it. The next step is you're going to now come up with a new list, and you're going to notice that new list is going to be different than your old list. And that new list is going to give you an intention and some projects to work on and a personal development curriculum, if you like, because you can now see there's a shift that's going on in the direction of your rudder. And that rudder is your fundamental orientation towards where you're going in your life. So this is a great awareness exercise. Just because you write a new list doesn't mean that your unconscious conditioning is automatically changed overnight. This is the starting point for setting a new intention, for having a greater level of accountability, a greater level of self-awareness, and setting new projects for your life to grow and expand to suit this new list. So this new list is a list that's designed to help keep you accountable to living the life of your dreams, to move towards the vision that you want. So this is all about self-awareness and empowerment and compassion, because you're now going to have two lists. You're going to have your modus operandi of where you are now, and then you're going to have the new way of being that you want to be, and those are going to be totally different. So there's going to be a gap. There's going to be a gap in your way of being. And so this is really important to have compassion for yourself and realize, okay, you're going through a transformation, you're going through a transition from one set of values to another set of values. Patience is required, compassion is required, and it's really about exploring this from a place of curiosity and lightness and evolution, rather than feeling like, oh, this is an exercise that you have to tick off and you've got to do it in a short period of time. It's not about that. It's really about just deepening your awareness. So I trust that makes sense. Does that make sense? And Dave, I just want to check in whether that makes sense to you and whether that's all clear as well.
Yeah, definitely. It's good. Actually, I like the I like the two formats: how it is assessing what you're doing and what are you valuing now that's getting your results, and then stepping into what else could I bring into that's going to have an impact on those results to be more in line with the outcomes that I really want. I like that.
Yeah, perfect. So that's really the way that we're looking at this, is we're asking the question, what do I need to value such that my life is going to be optimized into creating my vision? And so that list is obviously going to be different from everyone, and some of the things are going to drop off your list, some of them are going to shuffle around, and it's really just going to give you a deeper perspective about what's important, what your priorities are. So that's it. So you can see that basically that's all you need to do with your partner, is you just help them elicit their values. They might have 15, they might have 20, they might have 30. Once you elicit that list, that's it, you're all done. They then go away and they then review their list and they decide what their new list is going to be. So you're just there to help elicit that. Now, the reason why it's helpful to have a partner, I'm just going to pop you on mute there, Dave. The reason why you're going to get your partner to do this for you is because when you've got a partner, it makes it much more easier. If you're trying to think this process through as you're writing it down, sometimes the analytical mind gets in the way. Whereas when I was asking Dave just then, because it was quite conversational, Dave, you probably found like you could go deeper because I was just chatting with you. So it was more of an automatic, natural conversation. Whereas if you were thinking to yourself, hang on, what's important to me, you might be overthinking it and you might be questioning it. Whereas when we're speaking, there's just something natural about when we're conversing through conversation that just helps us tap into a deeper level of honesty and self-reflection. So that's the power of having a partner to help you go through this process. So yeah, connect with a partner this week in the group and pick someone to partner up with. If you don't have a partner, let me know, sing out and we'll get you partnered up. But yeah, reach out in the group and pick someone. I recommend budgeting for probably 20 minutes. Maybe you should be able to get it done in less than 20 minutes. So if you both organise your time well, you might even be able to do it both in under half an hour or maybe 40 minutes. And it's going to be a powerful exercise that is really going to give you a profound depth in your awareness. Now, I know some of you guys have done this before, because I know that some of you guys are my clients and I know you've done this exercise before. If you've already done this before, like for example, Dave, you've just done this now with me, you might want to pick a new context. So what I mean by new context is if you've already done this before, pick a new context like relationship values or work values, like your career values. I would say they're the two big contexts that I'd say they're probably the most helpful. Would be if you've already done your life values, do your intimate relationship values, or do what's important to you in your work or your business. So they're usually the other two most important dimensions, is relationships and work. They're the most important. They're the big ones that are for most people the ones that are most important. But you might also pick a dimension of health. You might say what's important to you in your health, and you might really want to go deeper into that. So it's really up to you, but pick a context that you feel like is going to be helpful for your life. So that's it for how you're going to do your values elicitation for your partner this week. So it's really quite simple. That's really all there is to it. And the biggest amount of value from getting clear on your values is the self-reflection that you're going to get from it. The value is not in you looking at your list and going, oh, look at me, I've got a great list of values. The value is going to come from, interesting that I didn't have that value, or interesting that that's at the bottom of my values list, or interesting that is something I didn't even think of. Wow, health didn't make it onto my values list. That's interesting. Okay, great. Time to explore that. Time to get curious about it. So this is, Dave, go for it.
It's interesting, Chris, because I think when I did this, I don't know, a year ago, last year, whenever it was, that I definitely came from the place of what values, if I had, would I look really good. That was just where my head was at. But I could just, in this process here, I was literally thinking about just over the last week, what have I done? What have I not done? And that would determine whether or not I brought that up. That whole, the frame that you set it up for, it becomes an opportunity to explore that. It's like it's just landed so deeper than what it would have done just trying to make it look good.
Yeah,
thanks. I like it.
I'm glad.
I can really see the juxtaposition of that.
Yeah, and that's the whole point of this. Is when I was the same as you, Dave. When I first did this exercise, I was unconsciously and innocently trying to look good. I was trying to create a list that made me feel good about myself. That was almost like I was trying to dress myself up in nice clothing to try and it's a very natural thing for us to do this in this process, because sometimes it's uncomfortable for us to confront what's not working in our life, and this process, when we overlay compassion with it and curiosity and surrendering to, of course there's going to be things in our life that we prioritize unconsciously that when we really look at it, we probably go, that's probably not in my highest good. Like of course there's going to be things that we inherit in our life that's not in our highest good. There's habits, there's patterns of human behavior, there's potentially traumatic experiences, there's all sorts of different belief systems, there's all sorts, whatever level of consciousness you're at, the impact of the society that you grew up in, like there's all these factors that they're gonna play a role, and none of it's a problem. This is the ultimate opportunity. When you can get radically honest about what your values are, you can now take responsibility for life, and this is why courage is required. This is why the virtues of compassion are so important, because without courage and compassion, then this whole exercise would just feel horrible. This would feel like, gee, I'm being confronted with all of my incongruencies. I'm being confronted with feeling like my life is out of control and like I'm living my life by habit. And that's the beautiful part of this exploration, is when we can have compassion and kindness for ourselves. Of course we're going to have elements in our values list that are probably outdated, that have been conditioned, where we picked some value up when we were 3 years old, because of what our dad said to our mum on one particular day. I had one client when I did this process, and I know I've shared this with some of you before, but I went through this process with one of my clients, and her number one value that came out in the wash was honesty. Now you might think, well, great, there's nothing wrong with honesty, but when you go a level deeper, and this is where, if you want to go deeper into your values, this is a great exploration, is you can ask, why is that important to me? And that's a great question. In fact, I recommend that you write that one down, because that's going to give you even deeper, far deeper insight around what the driver is of that value. Is when you ask, why is this important to me? What will come out in the wash from that question is going to be, if it's driven by fear, if it's driven by insecurity, if it's driven by wanting to avoid something, wanting to like really escape reality, or whether it's driven by something that's more inspiring or more loving or more moving towards. So there's no right or there's no wrong, but asking that question, why is it important to me, is really going to illuminate the core drivers of what's underneath that. So when I had my session with my client, what came out as number one, most important, was honesty. And I was curious, because I said, okay, what's I went through the questions. I said, well, what's honesty to you? And she says, always being 100% honest in every moment, like never ever telling a lie. And I said, well, what about a white lie? And I said, what about if you tell a white lie to make someone feel good, or you tell someone a lie because, for whatever reason? And she goes, well, I guess that's okay. And I said, well, it's not honest. And she goes, oh yeah, that's a good point. Right? And so I started to challenge her idea of honesty. And so it turned out, and I asked her, why is that important to you? Her dad cheated on her mum when she was really young, and honesty was now playing out as being something she was really afraid of people being dishonest to her, and she didn't trust men. She just didn't trust men. So that was now the most important thing, because she was afraid and she was wanting to protect herself, and she was always on edge, always wanting to not trust someone, so she didn't trust anyone, and so that was now playing out as the number one most important value. Now you can see that if you don't trust someone, if you've got limiting perceptions about men, if you now don't believe that you can trust people, you can see that's going to have a consequence. So on the surface, it might look like honesty was a great value. Oh, that's very virtuous. That's a wonderful value. When you go a little bit deeper, you might see that there's actually some resistance, there's some limitations there, and there's some fear there. Not that it's a problem, but you only uncover that information when you ask those deeper questions, like, what does that mean to you and why is that important to you? So that gets the deeper drivers. And straight away, just from asking those questions, some people, you can, because again, what we're doing is we're diving deep into the unconscious conditioning. I trust you get that this whole process is really digging out the unconscious files from the computer archives. It's really going deep into the operating system to find out the deep operating code. And so a lot of these values are unconscious. For anyone who hasn't done values work before, this will all be brand new, and it'll all be, wow, I had no idea that this was even a thing. I had no idea that there was deep conditioning and unconscious code that was driving my decisions. So straight away, this list is going to be quite profound for most people. But then secondly, when you go into each of the elements in the list, in the values hierarchy, there's going to be deep insights to be unpacked from each one of those things. Like when I had a conversation with my client about why is honesty important, she really had no idea how much fear she had around men and how much distrust that she had around men and how that was driving all of her interactions, and she was judging them and she was critical of them. She was really harsh of them. She would never let herself even get into a relationship because she wasn't even trusting them to begin with. So she would never allow herself to get far enough to even know if she could trust someone, because she'd always maybe see that there was maybe a white lie or some sort of little element of dishonesty, and so she'd completely write them off. So this is a powerful exploration that, when you go deeper, you'll start to get insights into each of these values, and you'll start to see more code, and it's very liberating. It's very powerful, and it's also sometimes you can see parts of yourself that are not necessarily comfortable. There are parts of yourself where you might see limiting beliefs, you might see unconscious projections of, where you might think bad things about people. You might have had situations in your past that you feel like you can't trust people, or you almost feel like the past is going to repeat itself over and over and over again, and you've now got that value in place to try and protect yourself. So there's a number of benefits that come from this process. And I just got a comment here from Dave. Men are like parking bays. All the good ones are taken, and the ones left over are disabled. Thank you for the humor, mate. I can definitely see that humor is up there in your values list. Absolutely. So this is a powerful exploration. As I said, there's no right, there's no wrong to it. It's one of the most powerful self-awareness exercises that exist that I know of, and it's well worth the trip going deep into exploring your values. So I'll share a few examples of how I've gotten heaps of value from this process. The most value that I've got from this process has come not from ending up with a nice list that I can hang on my wall and be proud of. The most value I've got from this process has been looking at what are the values that are not on my list. What are the values that didn't make the cut? That's been the most profound exploration, and I'll share how. I've done this process probably hundreds of times now, but one of the very first times that I did this process, I did my values list, and then I was looking at another list of values, and what I'll actually do is I'll send you a list of values, and there's a few thousand values that you can pick from. There's all sorts of values, including words that you probably don't even know what they mean. So there's all sorts of values. There's a big long list that I'll send you that is a really good way of expanding your understanding of life, because our mental vocabulary is ultimately one of the things that limits us. So, for example, the Eskimos or the Inuits, I think they call them, politically correct definition. They've got dozens of words for snow. They've got dozens of words for interacting with snow, because because they live in the snow, it's really important to be able to distinguish hard snow, soft snow, snow that you can build an igloo with, snow that you can fall through. So they've got a very high level of sensory, it's called sensory acuity. It's your ability to distinguish different things. So they've got a very high ability to distinguish different types of snow, because it's critical for them, because if they aren't able to distinguish that kind of snow, they're not going to survive. Whereas for us, we've maybe got like a few words: snow, sleet, hail, whatever, ice. It's all the same, whatever. It's hard stuff. It's either soft or it's hard, right? Whereas for them, it's really important. So your vocabulary and your ability to understand different values and language is either going to expand you and enrich your experience, or it's going to limit you. So the more expansive your vocabulary is, particularly around understanding different values, you're going to potentially see certain values that you didn't even know existed. And that's going to be like a whole new world to discover. And so this has happened for me. I was going through a list of values which I'll send you, and you guys can have a look through. And one of the values that really baffled me was compassion. Now, for me, that wasn't important. I looked at compassion as a word, and it just popped out at me, because I just thought, I don't even know what that means. Why would I bother valuing compassion? That doesn't sound very sexy. That's like, it sounds a bit weird. I remember they used to talk about compassion at church, and they talk about I have no interest in that. And then it got me curious, because I looked it up. What does it even mean? Right? And then my understanding of compassion now is it's actually one of the most important things that I can have in my life, because compassion is understanding plus love mixed together. That's how I view compassion. Now, if you have understanding and love, and if you orientate yourself in that way through life, well, you're naturally going to be kinder. You're naturally going to have less resistance to life. You're naturally going to be less triggered. You're going to be kinder to yourself and kinder to others. And you're going to give people the benefit of the doubt, including yourself. So when I saw this, it was huge, because I just realized I had no compassion. I just didn't. I was judgmental. I was aggressive. I was always frustrated. I was thinking there's wrong or right. And I was on my high horse riding through life thinking that I was always right, and that I needed to be right, and that there was a right or a wrong. And so that was a big wake-up call for me, just from noticing that it wasn't on my values list. Right? So you will notice as you scan through this list of values, there'll be some words that pop out, and you'll think, I don't even know what that means, but I'm going to check it out. Maybe it's the next most important thing that I'm yet to discover. And so for me, when I discovered compassion, it sent me on a whole journey. I was now reading books on it. I was now setting that as my personal development curriculum, to say, great, I didn't even know that I was missing that. But now that I know that I'm missing that, great, this is the ultimate opportunity. So you're going to potentially see words or values that you don't even know what it means, and then you might look it up, and it opens an entire doorway of transformation for yourself. So that's the beautiful thing that comes out of this exercise. It's not about the list, the pretty list that you've got that's nice and sequenced and you're happy with the numbers. It's really about the insight and the understanding that you tap into that really just opens up a whole new way of being, perhaps a whole new dimension of how you can live your life to a greater capacity. So that's the gift that's on offer, should you wish to explore it, and should you wish to take a deeper look at values. So that's it for this week. And so really all you need to do this week is pair up with someone in the class and book in, say, allow for maybe 30 minutes, maybe 40 minutes, pair up, set yourself a timer each for maybe 15 or 20 minutes, and just get through it really quickly. You've only got to go through it, maybe ask what's important to you 3 times. They'll empty the buffer, you'll ask again, they'll give you some more values, they'll empty the buffer, and you'll ask another time, and they'll empty the buffer. That's it, you'll write them down for them. You might choose to write them down in a spreadsheet. I recommend using a spreadsheet just because it's simple to sort of handle these. You might, if you don't have a spreadsheet, or if you're not that way inclined, just write them in a document or write them down and just send them a photo. So that way they don't have to focus on anything. You're the one that's guiding them through the process. So does that all make sense? Can I get a thumbs up? Is that pretty clear, pretty obvious? Excellent. Great. Well, we've got a few minutes left. I just wanted to check in just to see if you had any questions. Is there anything that either you want to know more about values from this week? Is there any questions that you've got on the exercise, or maybe just questions in general? Or even if there's no questions, if there was anything that you found insightful or helpful that you feel like might be worth sharing into the space. Yeah, all good? All good? Great, perfect. Well, that's it for this week, guys. So this week is your week to focus on your values, and you're also going to then rewrite your list of values based upon what your ultimate vision is for your life. So you'll be going back and referencing last week's exercise to help you inform what do you want your values to be. And so this is really an open exploration of what do I want my values to be? What ought my values look like? What values hierarchy is going to support my highest good to create the life that I want? And yeah, really start to challenge them. Really start to break them down, question them, obviously with compassion, with curiosity. There's no right, there's no wrong. This list is going to change multiple times. Don't feel like you've got to get it right. There's no consequence if you don't get it right. There is no right. It'll keep changing for the rest of your life, and it's a very powerful self-awareness exercise. So that's it for this week. Thanks for tuning in, guys. I look forward to seeing your shares in the group. Thank you all. Much love, and I'll see you guys again very soon. That's it for week 9. Cheers, guys.